I'm Madison Parker, and at 16, I've already proven that family expectations don't define your destiny. When I was 12, my grandmother looked me straight in the eye during our annual family gathering and declared, "That child will never succeed at anything meaningful." Her words cut deeper than any knife, especially coming from the woman who raised my successful older siblings. What she didn't know was that I'd been quietly building something extraordinary in my bedroom, a tech startup that would soon catch the attention of major investors. The same day she made that crushing prediction, I was already 3 months into developing an app that would change everything. 4 years later, I became the youngest CEO in my industry's history. But the real story isn't about my success. It's about what drove me there and how my grandmother's harsh words became the fuel for something she never saw coming. Growing up as the middle child in the Parker family meant existing in a constant state of being overlooked. My older brother Daniel was the golden child pre-med at Stanford with a perfect GPA and our parents' endless pride. My younger sister Emma was the prodigy, winning math competitions and science fairs since she was 8. And then there was me floating somewhere in between. Invisible and unremarkable dot, my report cards told the story everyone expected to hear. Madison shows potential but lacks focus, wrote Mrs. Henderson in 5th grade. Doesn't apply herself to her studies, noted Mr. Roberts the following year. Average student with room for improvement became the recurring theme through middle school. The adults in my life saw exactly what they wanted to see: a mediocre child who would never amount to much. What they didn't understand was that my mind worked differently. While Daniel memorized medical terminology and Emma solved complex equations, I found myself fascinated by how things connected, how systems worked, how problems could be solved in unexpected ways. I'd take apart old electronics in the garage, not to destroy them, but to understand their inner workings. I'd spend hours watching YouTube videos about coding and app development when I was supposed to be doing homework that my parents attended. Daniel's academic ceremonies and Emma's award presentations with beaming smiles and camera phones ready. When it came to my school events, they'd glance at the calendar with resigned obligation. Madison's parent-teacher conference is Thursday. Mom would sigh to Dad, already anticipating another conversation about my untapped potential. The dinner table conversations revolved around Daniel's latest research opportunity or Emma's invitation to a gifted program. I'd sit there mechanically eating my food, listening to their achievements while my own interest, technology, problem solving, creating solutions, were dismissed as playing on the computer too much. Even our extended family had assigned roles for us. Daniel was the future doctor, Emma was the little genius, and I was simply Madison, no descriptor necessary. At family gatherings, relatives would ask Daniel about his studies and Emma about her latest academic triumph. They'd pat my head and ask generic questions about school before quickly moving on to more interesting conversations. This invisible status became my armor and my motivation. While my family focused on traditional measures of success, I quietly developed skills they didn't recognize as valuable. I learned to code not because anyone encouraged me, but because the logical structure of programming made sense to my brain in ways that traditional subjects never did. I studied user interface design not for grades, but because I was genuinely curious about how to make technology more intuitive and accessible. My bedroom became my sanctuary, filled with notebooks containing sketches of app ideas, printed tutorials I found online, and the old laptop Dad had discarded when he upgraded. While my family saw a messy teenager's room, I saw a laboratory where real learning was happening. Here, surrounded by my clutter, I was building something none of them could imagine. The irony wasn't lost on me that the child they considered least likely to succeed was the one working hardest toward a goal they couldn't even comprehend. Every dismissive comment, every overlooked achievement, every moment of being invisible added fuel to a fire they didn't know was burning. I was preparing to prove them all wrong, and they had no idea what was coming. The last birthday card I received from Grandma Rose arrived 2 weeks before that devastating family gathering. Her handwriting, still elegant despite her 78 years, filled the card with warm wishes. To my dear Madison, may this year bring you all the happiness and success you deserve. You have such a unique way of seeing the world. Love always, Grandma. I had tucked it into my desk drawer, smiling at her words about my unique way of seeing the world. If only I had known how quickly her perspective would change. The annual Parker family barbecue was held at Uncle Mike's house as always. The same routine unfolded, Daniel holding court with the adults, discussing his medical school applications, while Emma demonstrated some mathematical concept to our amazed aunts. And uncles? I found my usual spot on the periphery, helping with food preparation and trying to stay invisible. The moment that would define my relationship with my family happened during dessert. Grandma Rose was seated at the head of the picnic table, surveying her family with the authority of someone who had lived through 8 decades and raised 5 children. The conversation had naturally turned to our futures, as it always did. "Daniel will make an excellent doctor," she proclaimed, nodding approvingly at my brother. "And Emma, with that brilliant mind of hers, could be anything she wants: scientist, mathematician, maybe even an astronaut." The family murmured their agreement, heads nodding like bobbleheads. Then her gaze fell on me. I was quietly eating my slice of apple pie, trying not to draw attention to myself, when I felt her eyes boring into me. The table fell silent, waiting for Grandma's assessment of the 3rd grandchild. She studied me for what felt like an eternity, her expression growing increasingly disappointed. Finally, she shook her head with a dismissive gesture that made my stomach drop. "That child," she said, pointing directly at me as if I weren't sitting right there, "will never succeed at anything meaningful." The words hit me like a physical blow. The entire table fell silent, the kind of silence that follows a car accident when everyone's too shocked to speak. I looked around at my family members, waiting for someone to defend me, to contradict her harsh judgment. My parents stared at their plates. My aunts and uncles suddenly found their drinks fascinating. Even Daniel and Emma looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Grandma Rose continued, oblivious to the devastation she was causing. "Some children are just destined for mediocrity. Madison has no focus, no drive, no special talents. She'll probably end up in some dead-end job, if she's lucky." She waved her hand dismissively. "Not every child can be exceptional." I felt my face burning with humiliation and hurt. This was the woman who used to read me bedtime stories, who taught me to bake cookies, who told me I was special. Now she was publicly declaring me a failure at 12 years old, and my entire family was letting it happen. I excused myself quietly, mumbling something about feeling sick, and retreated to Uncle Mike's guest bathroom. There, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, an ordinary-looking 12-year-old with tear-stained cheeks and crushed dreams. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The hurt was overwhelming, but underneath it, a different emotion was taking root: determination. When I finally returned to the gathering, the conversation had moved on to other topics. No one acknowledged what had happened. No one asked if I was okay. It was as if Grandma's cruel verdict had simply been accepted as fact, filed away with other uncomfortable truths the family preferred not to discuss. That night, lying in my bed, I replayed her words over and over. "We'll never succeed at anything meaningful." The phrase echoed in my mind, each repetition stoking a fire I didn't know existed. She had no idea that in my bedroom, I was already 3 months into developing something that would prove her devastatingly wrong. My first coding notebook was a worn, spiral-bound pad I grabbed from the school supply closet, its blue cover already peeling at the edges. Inside those pages, sketched in careful pencil and colored pen, were the wireframes and code snippets that would eventually change my life. But that first night after Grandma's pronouncement, it was just a repository for my desperate need to prove her wrong. I discovered coding 3 months earlier, almost by accident. While researching a science project on computer programming, I stumbled across a free online tutorial called Code for Kids. The instructor, a cheerful woman named Jennifer, made programming seem like magic typing mysterious commands that made things appear on screen, creating interactive elements that responded to clicks and inputs. That first Hello World program was a revelation. For the first time in my academic life, something made perfect sense. Unlike the seemingly arbitrary rules of grammar or the memorization required for history, coding followed logical patterns. If this, then that. Input, process, output. The computer didn't care about my mediocre grades or my family's expectations. It simply executed the instructions I gave it, flawlessly. And without judgment, my bedroom transformed into a secret laboratory. The old Dell laptop Dad had discarded became my primary tool, its scratched case hiding the incredible potential within. I set up a desk in the corner, positioning myself so I could quickly minimize windows if anyone entered. My walls were soon covered with flowcharts and app sketches. Disguised among school posters and band photographs, the learning curve was steep and often frustrating. I spent entire weekends debugging simple programs, trying to understand why my code wouldn't run properly. Error messages became my teachers. Syntax error, undefined variable, missing bracket. Each failure taught me something new, and slowly, I began to understand the language of computers. I devoured every tutorial I could find. While my family watched television downstairs, I was upstairs learning about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and eventually more complex languages like Python and Java. I joined online forums where teenage programmers shared their projects and helped each other solve problems. For the first time in my life, I found a community where I belonged. The forums were revelatory. Here were kids my age building games, creating websites, and solving complex problems through code. They didn't care about traditional academic metrics or social hierarchies. They judged each other based on the elegance of their solutions and the creativity of their implementations. When I shared my first simple program, a calculator that could handle basic arithmetic, the encouragement I received was unlike anything I'd experienced in school. Nice, clean code structure, commented a user named DevMaster15. Have you considered adding error handling for division by 0? These weren't empty compliments. They were specific technical feedback that helped me improve. The programming community valued precision, creativity, and problem-solving ability over conformity, or conventional achievement measures. My first successful app was embarrassingly simple, a digital pet that you could feed, pet, and play with. The graphics were basic, the interactions limited, but when I clicked run and saw my creation come to life on the screen, I felt a rush of accomplishment unlike anything I'd experienced in school. I had built something from nothing, using only my mind and determination. The pet had different moods based on how well you cared for it. Feed it regularly and play with it, and it would be happy and energetic. Neglect it, and it would become sad and sluggish. The logic was straightforward, but implementing it required understanding variables, conditional statements, and user interface design. I spent weeks refining the digital pet, adding features and improving the graphics. Each enhancement taught me new programming concepts. I learned about data persistence when I wanted the pet's status to be remembered between sessions. I studied animation techniques to make the pet's movements more lifelike. I researched color theory to make the interface more appealing. The breakthrough moment came on a Tuesday evening in October. I had been struggling with a login system for weeks, trying to understand how users could create accounts and save their data. After dinner, while supposedly doing homework, I finally cracked the code. The satisfaction of seeing login successful appear on my screen was intoxicating. This wasn't just about making a program work. It was about understanding complex systems and creating something that could serve multiple users with different needs. I was building infrastructure, not just applications. The concepts I was learning about databases, user authentication, and security would become the foundation for everything that followed. I began documenting everything in my notebook, not just code, but ideas for apps, business models, target demographics. I studied successful apps, analyzing what made them popular and how they generated revenue. Terms like user engagement, monetization strategies, and market penetration became part of my vocabulary, even though I couldn't share. This knowledge with anyone. The notebook became my most precious possession. I carried it everywhere, disguised as a regular school binder but containing the blueprint for my future. During boring classes, I'd sketch new app interfaces in the margins. During lunch breaks, I planned feature implementations and user flows. Secrecy was both exhilarating and isolating. When my family asked about my day, I'd give vague responses about school and homework. never mentioning the breakthrough I'd made or the new concept I'd mastered. They saw a daughter who spent too much time on her computer. I saw a future entrepreneur preparing for success they couldn't imagine. My skills developed rapidly through pure necessity and obsession. I learned database design because my apps needed to store information. I studied user interface principles because I wanted my creations to be intuitive. I researched marketing strategies because I dreamed of reaching real users someday. The online programming community became my unofficial mentors. When I got stuck on a particularly challenging problem, I could post questions and receive helpful guidance from experienced developers around the world. These interactions taught me not just technical skills, but professional communication and collaborative problem solving. One evening, while working on a more complex application that could track homework assignments and deadlines, I realized I was no longer just learning programming. I was thinking like a software engineer. I was considering scalability, user experience, and maintainability. I was planning features based on actual user needs rather than just technical possibilities. By the time Grandma made her crushing prediction, I wasn't just a kid playing around with code anymore. I was a self-taught programmer with genuine skills, a portfolio of practice applications, and most importantly, a vision for something bigger. Her words didn't destroy me, they crystallized my purpose. I would build something meaningful, something successful, and I would do it in the shadows until I was ready to step into the light and prove them all wrong. The notebook filled with wireframes and code snippets was my secret weapon, and every page represented another step toward a future no one in my family could imagine. The email from Marcus Chen arrived on a Thursday evening, printed on our ancient home printer and carefully folded into my coding notebook like a precious artifact. Madison, it read, your question about database optimization shows real understanding of the underlying principles. Most beginners don't think about scalability at this stage. Keep pushing yourself, you're on the right track. Best, Marcus. It was the first time an adult had acknowledged my potential in programming, and it came from a complete stranger in an online coding forum. Marcus became my first real mentor, though we never met in person. He was a senior developer at a tech company in Seattle, someone who took time to answer questions from aspiring programmers in the community forums I haunted. While my family dismissed my computer time as wasted hours, Marcus recognized genuine talent and nurtured it with careful guidance and encouragement. His expertise extended far beyond basic programming concepts. Marcus taught me about software architecture, development best practices, and the professional standards that separated amateur hobbyists from serious developers. When I showed him my digital pet project, he didn't just praise the functionality. He provided detailed feedback about code organization, efficiency improvements, and scalability considerations. Your logic is sound, but you're not thinking about what happens when you have 1,000 users instead of just yourself, he wrote in one particularly helpful critique. Real applications need to handle unexpected inputs, network failures, and concurrent users. These aren't problems you face coding alone in your bedroom, but they're critical for anything that will serve actual users. My daily routine became a carefully choreographed dance of deception. I'd wake up early to code before school, claiming I needed extra time to study. During lunch breaks, I'd retreat to the library to research programming concepts instead of socializing with classmates. After school, I'd rush through homework so I could spend evenings developing my skills and working on increasingly complex projects. The technical challenges were immense. Learning advanced programming concepts without formal instruction meant relying on online resources, trial and error, and the patience of forum mentors like Marcus. I taught myself object-oriented programming by building increasingly complex applications. I mastered database design by creating systems to manage fictional businesses. Each small victory built my confidence and expanded my capabilities. Breakthrough that would define my next phase came from a simple observation during lunch period. I watched my classmates struggling to coordinate a group science project with conflicting schedules, unclear responsibilities, and growing frustration about who was supposed to do what. Traditional group text messages were chaotic, email chains were ignored, and face-to-face meetings were impossible to schedule. This wasn't just a problem at my school, it was a universal challenge for teenagers, trying to collaborate on anything beyond simple tasks. I envisioned an app that would make peer-to-peer coordination simple, trackable, and actually useful for the complex social dynamics of teenage life. My first real prototype emerged from weeks of careful planning and intensive development. The app I called GroupSync was designed specifically for teenage collaboration, with features that address the unique challenges young people faced when working together. Unlike generic project management tools designed for adults, GroupSync understood that teenagers had limited transportation, unpredictable schedules due to family obligations, and social sensitivities that could derail projects. The development process consumed my nights and weekends. I designed a clean, intuitive interface that would appeal to teenagers who had grown up with smartphones. I created a system for assigning tasks, tracking progress, sending automatic reminders, and managing the inevitable conflicts that arose when friends tried to work together professionally. The technical complexity was far beyond anything I'd attempted before. The app required real-time synchronization so that changes made by one group member would immediately appear for others. It needed push notifications to keep everyone informed without being annoying. Most challenging of all, it required sophisticated algorithms to suggest task assignments based on individual strengths, availability, and previous performance. Balancing this secret passion with family expectations required constant vigilance. When Mom asked about my grades, I'd show her decent report cards that reflected my ability to maintain academic performance while pursuing my real education. When Dad wondered why I spent so much time on the computer, I'd mention school projects and research assignments. They saw a daughter managing her responsibilities. I was actually running a covert operation to build my future. The most difficult aspect was the isolation. I was developing expertise in areas my family couldn't comprehend, achieving milestones they couldn't celebrate, and nurturing dreams they couldn't support. When they discussed Daniel's medical school applications or Emma's academic achievements at dinner, I had to bite my tongue to keep from sharing my own victories. Marcus's feedback on my GroupSync prototype was overwhelmingly positive. "This is production quality work," he wrote. "You've thought through the user experience, considered edge cases, and implemented sophisticated features. More importantly, you're solving a real problem that affects your target demographic. Have you considered pursuing this professionally?" His words were validation I couldn't get from anyone in my physical world. Here was a professional developer with years of industry experience telling me that my bedroom project had commercial potential. The encouragement gave me confidence to start thinking beyond just building apps for practice. I was ready to create something that could actually compete in the marketplace. I began studying the business side of technology. With the same intensity I'd applied to programming, I learned about startup funding, user acquisition strategies, and market analysis. I researched successful teen entrepreneurs, studying their paths from idea to implementation. Names like Mark Zuckerberg and Evan Spiegel became my heroes not because they were famous, but because they proved young people could build meaningful companies. The beta testing phase revealed both the potential and the limitations of GroupSync. I recruited classmates to test the app on real projects, and their feedback was enthusiastic but also illuminating. The core functionality worked well, but they suggested features I hadn't considered: integration with school calendars, parent notification options for major deadlines, and conflict resolution tools for when group dynamics broke down. "This is really useful," reported Sarah, one of my beta testers. "But what happens when someone in the group isn't pulling their weight? We need a way to address that without destroying friendships." Her feedback sparked an idea that would become central to my next, much more ambitious project. GroupSync was solving coordination problems, but the deeper issue was that teenagers needed better tools for managing all aspects of their social relationships, not just academic collaboration. My confidence grew with each completed feature and positive feedback from beta testers I'd recruited from online communities. I wasn't just playing with code anymore, I was developing a legitimate product with real market potential. The app that started as a solution to a simple problem was evolving into something that could actually compete in the marketplace. The technical skills were only part of my education. I was learning project management, user research, quality assurance, and customer support. I was becoming a complete developer and entrepreneur, all while maintaining the facade of being an ordinary middle school student who spent too much time on her computer. Marcus had introduced me to other developers in his network, creating an informal mentorship circle that provided guidance on everything from technical architecture to career planning. These relationships were preparing me for challenges I didn't even know existed yet, building a foundation of knowledge and confidence that would prove crucial in the months ahead. The breakthrough came to me during math class, ironically enough, scribbled on the back of a geometry homework assignment while Mrs. Patterson droned on about isosceles triangles. I was staring out the window, watching my classmates struggle with their lockers between periods, when the solution hit me with startling clarity. The sketch I drew that day, rough lines and hurried annotations covering every inch of white space, would become the foundation of everything that followed. The problem was hiding in plain sight, so obvious that adults had stopped seeing it entirely. Teenagers lived in a constant state of social complexity that previous generations couldn't fathom. We managed multiple friend groups, juggled conflicting social obligations, and navigated relationship dramas that shifted daily. Yet every app designed for teens was created by adults who had forgotten what it actually felt like to be young. My group sync project had taught me valuable lessons about user behavior and social dynamics, but it was addressing a symptom, not the root cause. The real issue was that teenagers needed a way to manage their entire social ecosystem, not just coordinating group projects, but handling friendship conflicts, organizing social events, maintaining relationships across complicated social networks, and developing the emotional intelligence to navigate it all successfully. I envisioned something revolutionary, a comprehensive social management platform designed by an actual teenager, for actual teenagers. Not another messaging app or photo sharing platform, but a tool that would help young people navigate the emotional and logistical complexity of modern adolescence. It would combine elements of project management, conflict resolution, event planning, and social networking into something entirely new. The core concept was elegantly simple, yet profound. What if teenagers had access to the same organizational and communication tools that successful adults used in professional settings, but adapted for the unique challenges of teenage social life? Instead of managing corporate projects, they coordinate friend group activities. Instead of resolving workplace conflicts, they'd navigate social drama with structured communication frameworks. Instead of networking for business purposes, they'd build and maintain meaningful friendships with intention and skill. My research began immediately, disguised as casual conversation and informal observation. I surveyed classmates about their biggest social challenges during lunch breaks and study halls. I analyzed existing social apps to identify gaps and opportunities. I studied conflict resolution techniques used in corporate and therapeutic settings, adapting them for teenage sensibilities and communication styles. The feedback revealed patterns I hadn't expected. The biggest stressors weren't just about organizing events or coordinating schedules. They were about understanding unspoken social rules, managing hurt feelings, and maintaining friendships through the inevitable misunderstandings that occurred when emotions ran high and communication skills were still developing. I wish there was a way to know if someone is actually mad at me or just having a bad day. One classmate confided during what she thought was casual conversation. Like, half the drama in our friend group comes from people misreading each other's moods and then making assumptions. Another friend described the exhausting mental energy required to keep track of complex social obligations. I'm supposed to remember that. Jessica doesn't like Sarah since their fight last month, but Emma is friends with both of them, and we're all supposed to go to the movies together this weekend. How do you plan something when you're trying to avoid putting people in awkward situations? The technical architecture I envisioned was ambitious beyond anything I'd attempted. The platform would need sophisticated algorithms to suggest conflict, resolution strategies based on personality types and relationship dynamics. It would require real-time coordination features for group planning, privacy controls that adapted to different social contexts, and integration with existing platforms without duplicating their basic functionality. The business model crystallized. as I researched successful teen-focused companies and studied their revenue strategies. Rather than relying on advertising or data collection approaches that felt exploitative and violated the trust that would be essential for intimate social management, I envisioned a freemium model with premium features for power users. Teenagers would pay small amounts for advanced planning tools, priority conflict resolution support, and customization options that reflected their individual social styles. The key was providing enough value in the free version to build a large user base, while offering compelling upgrades that felt worth the investment of their limited spending money. My competitive analysis revealed a surprising gap in the market that validated my instincts. Major tech companies were focused on content consumption and broadcasting, sharing photos, videos, and status updates. But no one was addressing the sophisticated coordination and relationship management needs of modern teenagers. Adults assumed young people only wanted entertainment, missing the opportunity to provide genuinely useful tools for personal development. The name came to me during a particularly stressful week when 3 different friend groups were dealing with interpersonal conflicts that I found myself mediating. Watching my classmates struggle to coordinate simple social activities while managing hurt feelings and conflicting personalities, I realized they needed help navigating these complex social waters with greater skill and confidence. Navigate. The app would be called Navigate, because that's exactly what teenagers needed: a compass and map for the complex social world they inhabited every day. The name suggested both direction and exploration, implying that social skills could be learned and relationships could be intentionally cultivated rather than left to chance. I began documenting every feature in meticulous detail, creating user stories and technical specifications that would guide development. The messaging system would include emotional intelligence prompts to prevent misunderstandings before they escalated. The planning tools would account for parental restrictions, transportation limitations, and the financial constraints that affected teenage social activities. The conflict resolution features would provide structured frameworks for addressing disagreements constructively. The scope was enormous, but my confidence had grown with each successful project. I've proven to myself that I could build sophisticated applications, understand user needs better than established companies, and implement solutions that actually worked in real-world situations. Navigate wouldn't just be another app, it would be a demonstration that teenagers could create comprehensive solutions for problems adults didn't even recognize. The most exciting aspect of the concept was its potential for genuine impact. Instead of just providing entertainment or convenience, Navigate would actually help young people develop crucial life skills: effective communication, conflict resolution, emotional intelligence, and collaborative planning. Users wouldn't just be consuming content, they'd be building capabilities that would serve them throughout their lives. The sketch on my geometry homework had evolved into something far more significant: a complete vision for revolutionizing how young people managed their social lives and developed interpersonal skills. All I had to do now was build it, test it with real users, and prove to the world that the child who would never succeed at anything meaningful was about to create something that would improve thousands of lives. The stack of rejection emails grew thicker each week, each one carefully printed and filed in a manila folder labeled Learning Opportunities. I had started collecting them after the 5th rejection, initially as a form of self-punishment, but eventually as motivation. Each rejection was annotated with my handwritten notes about what to improve, what questions to anticipate, and how to better communicate my vision to adults who saw only a naive teenager with unrealistic dreams. My first pitch was a disaster that still made me cringe months later. I had convinced a local investor to meet with me by claiming to represent a promising young entrepreneur without mentioning that entrepreneur was me. When I walked into the coffee shop, 14 years old and carrying a worn backpack instead of a briefcase, the confusion on his face was immediate and devastating. "Are you here with someone?" he asked, looking around for the adult he expected to meet. "I am the someone," I replied, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "I'm Madison Parker, and I'd like to discuss an investment opportunity in my social management platform for teenagers." He barely listened to my pitch. His attention wandered constantly, checking his phone and glancing at his watch with barely concealed impatience. When I finished my carefully rehearsed presentation about Navigate's market potential and technical innovation, he smiled condescendingly and said, "That's very ambitious, sweetheart, but you should focus on your schoolwork. Maybe start a lemonade stand first." The humiliation burned for days, but it also taught me valuable lessons about preparation, presentation, and the systemic barriers I would face. My age wasn't just a disadvantage, it was a wall that prevented adults from taking me seriously, regardless of my idea's merit or my technical capabilities. I needed a completely different strategy. I began researching investors who had previously funded young entrepreneurs, studying their backgrounds, investment philosophies, and portfolio. Companies with obsessive attention to detail. I learned to identify angels and venture capitalists who explicitly valued innovation over traditional credentials, who had track records of supporting unconventional founders with disruptive ideas. The rejection emails became more sophisticated as I targeted better prospects, but they were still rejections. While your concept shows creativity, we require founders with industry experience and proven track records. Read one typical response. Another investor wrote, "We don't typically consider investments from minors due to legal complications and liability concerns." The most painful rejections were the ones that acknowledged Navigate's potential but dismissed me as too young to execute the vision successfully. Each rejection stung, but I forced myself to extract every possible lesson from the experience. I improved my pitch deck based on feedback about market size calculations and competitive analysis. I strengthened my technical demonstrations after investors, questioned my development capabilities, and architectural decisions. One researched legal structures for minor-owned businesses after multiple concerns. About age-related complications and regulatory requirements. The breakthrough in my approach came when I stopped trying to hide my age and started leveraging it as a unique advantage. Instead of apologizing for being young, I began emphasizing my authentic perspective as a member of the target demographic. I'm not just building an app for teenagers, I would say with growing confidence, I am a teenager. Building an app that solves problems I experience every single day. My pitches became more confident and authentic as I learned to own my story rather than minimize it. I shared specific examples of social challenges that adult app developers had missed entirely. I demonstrated features that address needs older entrepreneurs didn't understand or consider important. I positioned my youth as invaluable market insight rather than inexperience that needed to be overcome. The rejections continued, but they became more respectful and constructive. Investors began acknowledging the validity of my market analysis even when they weren't ready to invest in such a young founder. Several asked to stay informed about my progress, suggesting they might reconsider once I had more user traction or reached a certain age threshold. "Madison, your platform addresses a real need, and your technical execution is impressive," wrote one investor who ultimately passed. "However, our fund has strict policies about founder age requirements. Please keep us updated on your progress. We'd love to reconsider this opportunity in a few years." I learned to separate rejection of my person from rejection of my idea, understanding that many investors genuinely believed Navigate had commercial potential, but couldn't overcome their institutional discomfort with my age. Others were concerned about legal complications of investing in a minor-owned business. These weren't personal failures, they were systemic barriers that required creative solutions rather than self-doubt. My resilience grew with each pitch meeting and email exchange. I developed thicker skin and better recovery strategies for handling disappointment. I learned to anticipate skeptical questions and prepare compelling responses backed by data and user research. I practiced handling condescension and dismissal with grace and professionalism, understanding that my reaction would determine whether doors remained open for future opportunities. The technical development continued throughout this period of financial rejection. I couldn't control investor prejudices or institutional barriers, but I could control the quality and functionality of my product. I refined Navigate's features based on extensive user testing with classmates and online beta testers. I improved the interface design based on feedback from users who found certain workflows confusing. I strengthened the backend architecture to handle growing user loads and feature complexity. Marcus provided crucial emotional support during this challenging period, reminding me that most successful entrepreneurs faced multiple rejections before finding the right investors. The investors who reject you now aren't necessarily wrong. He counseled during one particularly discouraging week. They're just not the right partners for what you're building. The right investor will see your age as an asset, not a liability. By the time I had collected 37 rejection emails, I had also built a functioning prototype that impressed everyone who actually used it. My user base was growing through word of mouth among teenagers who found Navigate genuinely helpful for managing their social lives. The engagement metrics were exceptional, with users spending an average of 43 minutes per day on the platform and returning consistently week after week. The rejection folder became a source of strength. Rather than shame, each email representing persistence, learning, and incremental improvement. I was building not just a business, but the resilience and skills necessary to succeed despite systemic obstacles. The investors who rejected me were missing an opportunity, but their rejection was preparing me for the investor who would finally recognize my potential and take a chance on something extraordinary. Sarah Chun's business card was unremarkable simple white cardstock with clean typography and minimal information. Sarah Chun, managing partner, Emergence Ventures, was all it said, along with contact details that seemed almost austere compared to the flashy cards I collected from other investors. But that small card tucked into my notebook after our chance meeting would prove to be the key that unlocked everything I had been working toward for months. I had snuck into the Pacific Northwest Tech Conference using a registration badge I'd found in the parking lot. The original attendee had apparently lost their badge, and I saw an opportunity to observe real investors and entrepreneurs in their natural habitat. At 15, I was clearly the youngest person in the convention center by at least a decade, but I wore my most professional outfit and carried myself with as much confidence as I could muster. The conference was a revelation. Here were hundreds of people discussing exactly the kinds of challenges I was facing: user acquisition, product development, scaling strategies, and funding approaches. I moved through the crowd like an anthropologist studying a foreign culture, taking careful notes and absorbing insights that no online tutorial could provide. Sarah was presenting a panel on identifying disruptive innovation in unexpected places. Her perspective was refreshingly different from the typical venture capitalist rhetoric that focused on established metrics and traditional founder profiles. She talked about finding extraordinary potential in ordinary circumstances, about how the best entrepreneurs often emerge from demographics that traditional investors systematically overlooked. The most transformative companies I've funded came from founders who brought fresh perspectives to problems that established players had stopped seeing clearly. She explained to the audience, when you're looking for true innovation, you have to be willing to invest in unconventional backgrounds and non-traditional approaches. During the Q&A session, I surprised myself by raising my hand and asking a question that had been bothering me throughout the conference. How do you evaluate founders who have great ideas and strong execution but don't fit the typical profile that investors expect? What metrics matter most when traditional credentials don't apply? Sarah's eyes found mine in the audience, and I saw a flicker of genuine interest rather than the polite tolerance I'd grown accustomed to from adults. That's exactly the kind of question that leads to breakthrough investments, she replied. The most successful entrepreneurs are often the ones who bring fresh perspectives to problems that established players have stopped seeing clearly. We look for evidence of real problem-solving ability, user validation, and the kind of obsessive focus that drives genuine innovation. After the panel, I approached her nervously, my heart pounding with the audacity of what I was attempting. Ms. Chun, I'm Madison Parker, and I wanted to thank you for your presentation. I'm actually working on something that might be relevant to your investment thesis. Instead of the patronizing smile I'd grown accustomed to from adults, Sarah looked genuinely curious. Tell me more, she said. Gesturing to a quiet corner of the exhibition hall where we could speak privately, I launched into my pitch for Navigate, but this time with a completely different approach based on what I'd learned from months of rejections. Instead of apologizing for my age or trying to minimize it, I emphasized how my perspective as a teenager gave me unique insights into an underserved and misunderstood market. I showed her my prototype on my phone, demonstrating features that solved problems she hadn't even considered. The existing social platforms treat teenagers like miniature adults or assume we only want entertainment. I explained as I navigated through Navigate's conflict resolution interface. But teenage social dynamics are actually more complex than most adult professional relationships. We need sophisticated tools for managing multiple friend groups, resolving conflicts constructively, and coordinating activities across complicated social networks. Sarah listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed she understood both the technical complexity and market potential of what I was building. She didn't dismiss my age or question my capabilities. Instead, she focused on metrics, user feedback, and competitive advantages with the same seriousness she would bring to evaluating any potential investment. "How many active users do you have?" she asked, pulling out her phone to take notes. "Just over 3,000, but the engagement rates are exceptional. Users spend an average of 43 minutes per day on the platform, and our retention rate is 78% after 30 days. Her eyebrows raised appreciably. "Those are impressive numbers for any social platform, especially one built by a single developer. "What's your growth rate?" "We're growing by about 200 new users per week, entirely through word of mouth. I haven't spent any money on marketing yet. Every user has come through organic sharing and referrals." Sarah made another note, her expression growing more interested. "Madison, I'm going to be direct with you. I've been investing in startups for 12 years, and I've never seen organic engagement metrics like these from such a young company. The fact that you've built this without external funding while maintaining those retention rates is remarkable." My heart was pounding as I realized this conversation was different from every other investor interaction I'd experienced. Sarah was evaluating Navigate as a legitimate business opportunity rather than dismissing it as an impressive hobby project. "I'd like to schedule a proper meeting," she continued. "I want to see your technical architecture in detail, understand your business model and growth strategy, and discuss how we might work together. Are you available next week?" I nodded eagerly, trying not to let my excitement show too obviously. I should mention that I'm 15, and there might be some legal complexities around investment structures for minors. Sarah smiled with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm rather than concern. "I've worked with unusual situations before, Madison. If the opportunity is as strong as it appears, we'll figure out the legal framework. Age is just a number when you're solving real problems for real people with exceptional execution." That evening, I sat in my bedroom staring at Sarah's business card, hardly believing what had just happened. After months of rejection and dismissal, I had found someone who saw my potential rather than my limitations. Sarah understood that great entrepreneurs could emerge from anywhere, including high school bedrooms, and she was willing to bet on vision and execution rather than conventional credentials. The business card I tucked into my notebook was more than contact information. It was proof that the right investor could see past conventional expectations to recognize extraordinary potential. Sarah Chan wasn't just offering the possibility of funding. She was offering validation, mentorship, and the resources to turn my secret project into a real company that could change how teenagers navigated their social lives. The bank statement arrived on a Tuesday morning, hidden among the usual collection of bills and advertisements. The envelope was addressed to me, Madison Parker, which was unusual enough to catch Mom's attention as she sorted the mail. I intercepted it before she could ask questions, but the damage was done. For the first time, my parents were actively curious about what I was doing with so much secrecy. The statement showed a deposit that would have been impossible to explain away as babysitting, money, or birthday gifts. Sarah's initial investment of $50,000 sat there in black and white, along with the business account designation that made it clear this wasn't a regular checking account. I had carefully hidden the financial aspects of my success, but now evidence was literally arriving at our front door. My behavior changes were becoming harder to conceal. I was receiving phone calls at strange hours for group projects that seemed to involve unusually professional conversations. I was disappearing for study sessions that sometimes lasted entire afternoons and required explanations about library hours and research requirements. My computer usage had evolved from casual browsing to intense, focused work sessions that I guarded jealously. "Madison, who is that on the phone?" Mom asked after I finished a 45-minute call with Sarah's legal team about incorporation, paperwork, and liability structures. "Just a classmate working on a presentation about entrepreneurship," I replied, which was technically true but completely misleading in context. Dad noticed my newfound interest in business news and financial reports. "Since when do you care about the stock market?" he asked when he found me reading TechCrunch articles over breakfast, taking notes about user acquisition strategies and venture capital trends. "I'm thinking about taking economics next year," I said, another half-truth that satisfied his curiosity, without revealing the real reason for my intensive research into startup financial planning. The stress of maintaining my double life was becoming exhausting. I was running a growing business with paying customers and increasing complexity while pretending to be an ordinary high school student. I was negotiating legal agreements and employment contracts while my parents thought I was doing homework and chatting with friends online. The cognitive load of managing two completely separate identities was taking its toll. The close calls were becoming more frequent and increasingly dangerous. I nearly missed a family dinner because of an emergency bug fix that required immediate attention from Navigate's growing user base. I had to excuse myself from Emma's birthday party to handle a server crash that was affecting thousands of users who depended on the platform for coordinating their weekend plans. Each crisis reminded me how precarious my situation was becoming. My business success was growing beyond my ability to hide it, but I wasn't ready for the family conversation that exposure would inevitably trigger. The most dangerous moment came during a family movie night. My phone rang with Sarah's distinctive ringtone just as we were settling in to watch a film together. Without thinking, I answered professionally. "Madison Parker, Navigate Technologies." The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone stared at me as I quickly ended the call, claiming it was a wrong number with more nervousness than conviction. But Daniel's expression told me he'd heard enough to be suspicious about my explanation. "Navigate Technologies?" he asked, later when we were alone in the kitchen. "That sounded pretty official for a wrong number, Madison." I deflected with a joke about telemarketers getting more creative with their scams, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. Daniel was pre-med, which meant he was naturally analytical and detail-oriented. He was starting to piece together the inconsistencies in my story, and his growing suspicion was becoming a threat to my carefully maintained secret. My laptop became a source of constant anxiety. I couldn't leave it unattended anywhere in the house, knowing that even a glimpse of my screen would reveal sophisticated business applications, financial dashboards, and customer support interfaces that no ordinary teenager would have access to. I started carrying it everywhere, claiming I needed it for schoolwork, but my paranoia was becoming obvious to anyone paying attention. The financial complexity was growing beyond my ability to hide it effectively. Navigate was generating significant revenue from premium subscriptions, and the accounting requirements were becoming more sophisticated with each passing week. I needed to file business taxes, maintain proper bookkeeping records, and comply with various regulations that required adult supervision and parental involvement. Sarah's lawyers had explained that my parents would eventually need to be involved in the legal structure, but I kept postponing the inevitable conversation, hoping to reach some magical threshold of success that would make their acceptance more likely. My sleep schedule became erratic as I tried to balance West Coast business, calls with East Coast school requirements. Customer support issues and emergency technical problems didn't respect my academic schedule. I was often up until midnight handling user complaints or implementing urgent patches, then struggling to stay awake during first period classes. The next morning, "Madison, is everything okay at home?" asked Mrs. Rodriguez after I fell asleep during her history lecture for the third time that week. I assured her everything was fine, but the concern in her voice reminded me how much my behavior had changed. I was no longer the invisible middle child coasting through school with adequate but unremarkable performance. I was becoming a teenager with obvious secrets, and adults were starting to notice the transformation. The guilt was almost unbearable. My family trusted me, and I was deceiving them every day about the most important aspects of my life. When they asked about my day, I gave sanitized versions of my activities that omitted the crucial details. When they shared their own news and achievements, I smiled and nodded while mentally comparing their traditional successes to my unconventional accomplishments. The bank statements kept coming, each one showing larger deposits and more complex transactions from Navigate's growing revenue streams. I intercepted them religiously, but I knew it was only a matter of time before one slipped through or someone asked direct questions I couldn't deflect convincingly. My relationship with my siblings grew strained as I became more secretive and unavailable. Emma wondered why I no longer helped her with homework, not knowing I was often in business meetings during the hours she needed assistance. Daniel asked fewer questions about my activities, but his silence felt more ominous than curiosity would have. That night, staring at my latest bank statement showing a balance that exceeded my parents' annual income, I realized the charade couldn't continue much longer. My success was growing too large to hide, and my family was too smart to remain ignorant indefinitely. The secret that had protected me was becoming a burden that threatened to destroy the relationships I cared about most. The employment contract I signed with Jake Morrison was printed on official letterhead that read Navigate Technologies, Inc. At the top, Jake was 24, a Stanford graduate with 3 years of experience at Google, and he was about to become my first official employee. The surreal nature of the situation wasn't lost on either of us. A 15-year-old CEO hiring someone nearly a decade older with impressive credentials. I have to admit, Jake said during our video interview, this is the most unusual hiring process I've ever been through. But your platform is genuinely innovative, and Sarah Chen's endorsement carries a lot of weight in this industry. Jake's expertise in back-end architecture was exactly what Navigate needed for its official launch. My self-taught programming skills had carried the platform through its beta phase, but scaling to support thousands of simultaneous users required professional-grade infrastructure. I swallowed my pride and acknowledged that I needed help from people who knew things I hadn't learned yet. The legal complexities of being an underage CEO were mind-boggling. Sarah's lawyers had created a special corporate structure that protected both my interests and those of my employees and investors. My parents had to sign numerous documents they didn't fully understand, agreeing to oversight roles they hadn't expected to play. The conversations with them about my secret business were painful but necessary. "You've been running a company for how long?" Dad asked, staring at the incorporation papers in disbelief. "About 8 months as a formal business entity, but I've been developing the platform for almost 2 years," I replied, watching their expressions shift from confusion to amazement to concern. Mom's single quotes as first question was whether I was in any legal trouble. Her second was whether I'd been neglecting my education. Her third was how much money was involved. And when I showed her the financial statements, she nearly fainted. The product testing phase intensified as we prepared for the public launch. I had recruited a diverse group of beta testers from different high schools, ensuring that Navigate would work for various social dynamics and cultural contexts. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, but it also revealed features and edge cases I hadn't considered. "The conflict resolution tools are amazing," wrote one beta tester. "But what about situations where adults need to be involved? Sometimes teenage problems require parental or teacher intervention." This feedback led to one of Navigate's most important features, graduated escalation protocols, that could automatically involve trusted adults when situations exceeded peer-to-peer resolution capabilities. It was exactly the kind of insight that could only come from actual teenagers using the platform in real-world situations. The marketing strategy was unlike anything traditional companies would attempt. Instead of buying advertising or hiring marketing agencies, I leveraged the authentic enthusiasm of my beta testers. They became Navigate's marketing team, sharing the platform with friends who genuinely benefited from its features. The organic growth was slower than paid advertising might have achieved, but it was also more sustainable and authentic. My relationship with Jake evolved from employer-employee to something more like mentor-student, despite our unusual age dynamic. He taught me professional development practices like code reviews, automated testing, and deployment procedures. I shared insights about teenage behavior and social dynamics that informed product decisions. We were learning from each other in ways that surprised us both. Madison, Jake said during one of our weekly check-ins, I want you to know that working for you has been one of the most interesting experiences of my career. You have instincts about product development that people twice your age haven't developed yet. The pre-launch anxiety was overwhelming. Despite months of testing and preparation, I was terrified that Navigate would fail publicly, proving my grandmother's prediction correct. Every bug report felt like a personal failure. Every piece of negative feedback triggered hours of self-doubt. The pressure of being so young and so visible in the tech industry was unlike anything I'd experienced. Sarah provided crucial emotional support during this period. Every founder goes through pre-launch terror, she assured me. The fact that you're nervous means you care about quality and user experience. That's exactly the mindset that leads to successful products. The technical infrastructure was finally ready for scale. Jake had rebuilt the backend to handle 10 times our current user load, implemented robust security measures, and created monitoring systems that would alert us to any performance issues. The platform that had started as a bedroom project was now a professional-grade application, ready for widespread adoption. My family's adjustment to my new reality was ongoing and complicated. Daniel struggled with the fact that his younger sister was already more successful than he was. Emma was fascinated by the technology, but confused about how I'd hidden such a significant part of my life. My parents were proud but worried about the impact on my education and normal teenage development. The final pre-launch week was a blur of last-minute testing, media interviews, and legal documentation. Tech blogs were already writing preview articles about the teenage CEO who might revolutionize social technology. The attention was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. On the night before launch, I sat in my bedroom, the same room where I'd first learned to code, surrounded by monitors displaying Navigate's analytics dashboards, user feedback forms, and launch checklists. Tomorrow, my secret project would become public, and there would be no turning back. The first news article appeared at 6:47 a.m. Pacific Time, published by TechCrunch with the headline, Teen Creates a Revolutionary App That Actually Understands Teenagers. I had set up Google Alerts for Navigate mentions, and my phone started buzzing before I was fully awake. The article included screenshots of the platform, quotes from beta testers, and a photo of me that made me look impossibly young and simultaneously determined. Launch day had arrived with all the ceremony of flipping a switch. At exactly 8 o'clock, Jake and I pushed the final code update that would make Navigate available in app stores worldwide. There was no countdown, no champagne, no celebration, just two people staring at computer screens, waiting to see if the world would embrace what we'd built. The initial response was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first hour, we had over 500 new registrations. By lunch, that number had grown to 3,000. My phone was ringing constantly with interview requests from tech blogs, local news stations, and podcasts I'd never heard of. The attention was intoxicating and terrifying. Madison, this is incredible, Sarah texted me around noon. The user acquisition numbers are exceeding our most optimistic projections. How are the servers holding up? Jake's infrastructure planning proved prophetic. Despite the massive influx of new users, Navigate's performance remained smooth and responsive. The monitoring dashboard showed green across all metrics. Response times were fast, error rates were minimal, and user engagement was extraordinary. The social media buzz was unlike anything I'd anticipated. Teenagers were sharing screenshots of Navigate solving real problems in their friend groups. Parents were posting about how the conflict resolution features had helped their kids navigate difficult social situations. Teachers were commenting about improved collaboration on group projects. One tweet particularly caught my attention. My daughter has been using a Navigate app for 3 weeks, and the difference in her stress levels is amazing. Finally, an app that actually helps teens instead of just entertaining them. #ParentWin. The financial metrics were equally impressive. Our freemium model was converting users to paid subscriptions at a rate of 12%, significantly higher than industry averages. Premium features like advanced planning tools and priority conflict resolution were resonating with users who saw genuine value in the platform. By mid-afternoon, Navigate had been featured on the homepage of both the iOS App Store and Google Play Store. The editorial teams at both companies had recognized the platform as genuinely innovative rather than just another social app. The visibility boost drove our registration numbers even higher. The most gratifying feedback came directly from users. Teenagers were sending detailed messages about how Navigate had helped them organize group trips, resolve friendship conflicts, and manage complex social obligations. These weren't generic reviews, they were personal stories about real problems being solved by something I'd built. I used Navigate to coordinate my Sweet 16 party, and it was perfect, wrote one user. All the guest list drama that usually happens was handled through the conflict resolution tools, and everyone actually had fun instead of fighting. The media attention created unexpected challenges. Reporters wanted to interview me at school, which required coordination with administrators who weren't sure how to handle a student. CEO. Photographers wanted staged shots of me coding in my bedroom, which felt artificial and invasive. Everyone seemed fascinated by the novelty of my age, rather than the substance of what I created. The most meaningful moment of launch day came during an interview with a local television station. The reporter asked me what I wanted people to understand about Navigate and teenage entrepreneurship. I want adults to know that teenagers are capable of solving complex problems when we're given the tools and taken seriously. I said, Navigate exists because I experience the problems it solves every day. Sometimes the best solutions come from the people who actually live with the problems. Revenue numbers exceeded our projections by 300%. In a single day, Navigate generated more income than many startups see in their first 6 months. The combination of organic user growth, premium subscription conversions, and strategic partnerships created multiple revenue streams that validated our business model. Jake and I worked until nearly midnight, monitoring systems and responding to customer support requests. Despite our preparation, the volume of users revealed bugs and edge cases we hadn't anticipated. But every issue was fixable, and more importantly, users were patient and supportive as we addressed problems in real time. The day ended with Navigate ranking in the top 10 social apps in both major app stores, over 15,000 active users, and feature articles in major tech publications. But the most important metric was user satisfaction. The early reviews were overwhelmingly positive, with an average rating of 4.7 out of 5 stars. As I finally closed my laptop that night, I reflected on the journey from that first Hello World program to this moment of public validation. The platform that had started as a secret hobby in my bedroom was now being used by teenagers across the country to solve real problems and improve their lives. The financial success was gratifying, but the user feedback was transformative. I had built something that genuinely mattered to people, something that made their lives easier and their relationships stronger. That realization was worth more than any amount of money or media coverage. The phone call that changed everything came at 2:30 p.m. on a Thursday, while I was in chemistry class pretending to pay attention to molecular structures. My phone was supposed to be in my backpack, but I'd been monitoring Navigate's user growth obsessively since launch. When I saw Grandma Rose on the caller ID, my stomach dropped. I slipped out of class and answered in the hallway, trying to keep my voice casual. Hi, Grandma. Madison Parker, what in the Lord's name is going on? Her voice was sharp with confusion and disbelief. I just got off the phone with your Aunt Helen, who saw you on the morning news talking about some computer program you invented. She said they called you a CEO. A CEO, Madison? My carefully constructed secret was unraveling in real time. I had forgotten that Aunt Helen lived in Seattle and watched the local news religiously. Of course, she would see my interview and immediately call the family matriarch with the shocking news. Well, Grandma, it's complicated. Don't you? It's complicated me, young lady, she interrupted. I said not 3 years ago that you would never succeed at anything meaningful, and now Helen is telling me you're running some kind of business that's on the television and in the newspapers. Which one of us is losing their mind? I took a deep breath and made the decision to tell her everything. Standing in an empty school hallway, I explained 3 years of secret work, hidden achievements, and carefully concealed success. I told her about learning to code, building Navigate, finding investors, and hiring employees. I described the user base, the revenue, and the media coverage that was making my story public, whether I wanted it to be or not. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for what felt like an eternity. When Grandma finally spoke, her voice was completely different, softer, confused, almost vulnerable. You mean to tell me that while I was worrying about your future, you were already building one that none of us could even imagine?
Yes, ma'am. Another long pause.
Madison, honey, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Is this real? Are you actually running a successful business? Or is this some kind of elaborate prank or misunderstanding? I explained the user numbers, the revenue figures, and the investor backing. I told her about Jake and the other team members I was hiring. I described the legal structure that made me the youngest CEO in the industry. Every detail I shared seemed to deepen her shock. Dear Lord, she whispered. I told everyone you'd never amount to anything meaningful. I said it right to your face, in front of the whole family. And you already were something meaningful, you already were successful. How could I have been so blind? The pain in her voice was unmistakable. Grandma Rose had spent 3 years believing she'd made an accurate assessment of my potential, only to discover she completely misunderstood the grandchild she dismissed so cruelly. Madison, what have I done? She continued. What kind of... Grandmother says such horrible things to a child who was already proving her wrong. I found myself in the strange position of comforting the woman who had devastated me with her prediction. Grandma, you couldn't have known. I kept it secret from everyone. Even Mom and Dad didn't know until a few weeks ago. But I should have seen something, she insisted. I should have recognized that you had special talents, even if they weren't the same as Daniel's or Emma's. Instead, I looked at you and saw failure before you'd even had a chance to succeed. The conversation continued. For nearly an hour, with Grandma asking detailed questions about Navigate and my business experience. She wanted to understand not just what I accomplished but how I'd accomplished it without any adult guidance or support. Her curiosity was genuine and tinged with regret. I keep thinking about that day at the barbecue, she said. You just sat there and took it when I said those awful things. You didn't defend yourself or argue with me. Were you already working on this computer program then? I'd been coding for about 3 months by then, I admitted. I had the basic skills, but I was still learning. Your words actually motivated me to work harder. Oh, Madison. Her voice broke slightly. I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. The apology I never expected to receive was overwhelming. For 3 years, I'd carried the weight of her prediction, using it as fuel for my determination, but also bearing the pain of feeling unloved and undervalued by someone whose opinion mattered deeply to me. Grandma, I need to tell you something. I said, what you said hurt me more than you'll ever know. But it also pushed me to prove you wrong. In a strange way, your doubt made me stronger. That doesn't make what I said acceptable, she replied firmly. A child shouldn't have to prove their worth to their own grandmother. I failed you, Madison, and I failed our entire family by not seeing your potential. By the time our call ended, Grandma had asked for Navigate's website address, my media, interviews, and contact information for my parents so she could have a fuller conversation about what she'd missed. She wanted to understand everything, not just my current success. But the journey that had led to it, the phone call I'd been dreading, turned into something unexpected. The beginning of healing between us. Grandma's shock and regret were genuine, and her desire to understand and support me going forward felt authentic. The woman who had predicted my failure was now trying to comprehend the magnitude of her misjudgment. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, who had received a very emotional call from Grandma Rose. Madison, Mom said, I think you need to prepare yourself for some very heartfelt conversations at this weekend's family gathering. Your grandmother has some things she wants to say to you and to all of us. The handwritten agenda I prepared for our family meeting was tucked into my notebook. every point carefully considered and rehearsed. Points to address. 1. The 3 years of secrecy and why it was necessary. 2. How family expectations shaped my choices. 3. Setting new boundaries for how we communicate about success and potential. 4. Moving forward with honesty and mutual respect. I had learned from my business experience that difficult conversations required structure and clear objectives. Setting was Uncle Mike's living room, the same space where Grandma had delivered her crushing verdict 3 years earlier. But this time I had called the meeting. This time I was the one with something important to say. The family gathered with a mixture of curiosity, pride, and obvious discomfort about the role reversal. Grandma Rose arrived early and asked to speak with me privately before the others joined us. Her appearance had changed subtly. She seemed smaller, more uncertain than the confident matriarch who had pronounced judgment on my future. In her hands, she carried a manila folder containing every news article about Navigate she'd been able to find. Madison, before we talk with everyone else, I need you to know that I've spent the last 3 days reading everything I could find about what you've accomplished, she said, placing the folder on the coffee table between us. I've tried to understand not just what you built, but how you built it, and why you felt you had to hide it from all of us. She opened the folder and pulled out a printed screenshot of Navigate's App Store page, showing its 4.8-star rating and thousands of reviews. This review here, she said, pointing to one particular comment, says that your app helped a teenage girl resolve a conflict with her best friend that had been going on for months. Another one says it helped organize a group project that prevented 3 friendships from falling apart. I nodded, unsure where she was heading with this. Madison, you didn't just build a successful business, she continued. You built something that's actually helping people. You saw problems that adults missed and created solutions that work. That's not just success. That's leadership, innovation, and genuine contribution to the world. When the rest of the family joined us, I could feel the tension in the room. Daniel sat stiffly, still processing the fact that his little sister had achieved more professional success than he had. Emma was fascinated but confused about why I'd hidden such an important part of my life. My parents looked proud but concerned about the impact of sudden fame and responsibility on my development. I began with the agenda I'd prepared, but the conversation quickly became more emotional and authentic than any business meeting I conducted. 3 years ago, in this room, I was told that I would never succeed at anything meaningful. I said, looking directly at Grandma Rose. That statement devastated me, but it also motivated me in ways I didn't expect. I decided that if my family couldn't see my potential, I would develop it in secret until I could prove my worth. Grandma's eyes filled with tears, but she let me continue. The secrecy wasn't just about protecting myself from more criticism. It was about creating space to fail and learn without judgment. Every mistake I made while learning to code, every investor who rejected me, every bug in my early prototypes, I could handle those failures privately and learn from them without anyone telling me I was wasting my time. Daniel leaned forward. Madison, I had no idea you were going through any of this. I wish you had felt like you could talk to us. But could I really? I asked. When was the last time anyone in this family took my interest seriously? When I talked about technology or programming, you all assumed it was just gaming or social media. None of you thought I was capable of creating something meaningful. The uncomfortable silence that followed confirmed what I'd suspected all along. My family had unconsciously written me off as the underachiever, the one who would need the most help and guidance to find her way in life. Mom spoke next, her voice careful and measured. Madison, we're incredibly proud of what you've accomplished, but we're also concerned about how this experience has affected you. Keeping such a big secret for so long, dealing with adult responsibilities and pressures, that must have been incredibly isolating. It was isolating, I acknowledged. But it was also empowering. For the first time in my life, I was being judged on my actual performance rather than others' expectations. Investors, employees, and users didn't care about my age or my family's assumptions. They cared about whether I could solve problems and deliver results. Emma asked the question that had been bothering her most. Why didn't you trust us enough to share what you were doing? We're your family. We should have been supporting you. This was the hardest part of the conversation, explaining how their lack of faith had become self-fulfilling in reverse. I couldn't risk having my confidence undermined while I was learning, I said. Every time someone dismissed my interests as playing on the computer, it reinforced my decision to keep my real work secret. I needed to build something substantial before subjecting it to family scrutiny. Grandma Rose had been quietly listening throughout the conversation, but finally she stood up with obvious effort and moved to sit directly across from me. Madison, I need to say something to you and all of us, she began, her voice shaking slightly. 3 years ago, I made one of the worst mistakes of my life. I looked at a brilliant, creative child and saw only what she wasn't, instead of recognizing what she was becoming. I dismissed potential I was too limited to understand. She turned to address the entire family. We all failed Madison. We created an environment where she felt she had to hide her talents and achievements because we couldn't see past our own narrow definitions of success. That failure is on all of us, but it starts with me. The tears that followed were cleansing. For everyone, for the first time in years, we were having an honest conversation about expectations, support, and the different ways people can excel. The family meeting I had dreaded became the foundation for rebuilding relationships based on mutual respect rather than predetermined roles. By the end of our conversation, we had established new ground rules for how we would communicate about achievements, challenges, and dreams. Most importantly, we acknowledged that success comes in many forms, and that supporting each other meant recognizing and nurturing different types of potential. The magazine cover arrived by courier on a Monday morning, featuring a professional photograph of me sitting confidently at my desk with multiple monitors displaying Navigate's dashboard. Teen CEO sensation. How Madison Parker built $1 million app empire, read the headline across the latest issue of Tech Innovators Monthly. The sight of my face on a national magazine was surreal 3 months earlier. I'd been completely unknown outside my small user base. The media attention had exploded, beyond anything Sarah and I had anticipated. What started as local news coverage had snowballed into national features, podcast interviews, and speaking invitations from conferences across the country. Every journalist seemed fascinated by the same angle: the teenager who had built a successful company while her family remained completely unaware. The interview requests were overwhelming. CNN wanted a segment for their morning show. The Wall Street Journal was preparing a feature about young entrepreneurs disrupting traditional industries. Forbes had reached out about including me in their 30 under 30 list, though they'd never had a 16-year-old candidate before. Navigate's growth matched the media frenzy. User registrations had increased by 400% since the initial launch coverage, and our daily active user count was approaching 50,000. The platform was handling the load beautifully, thanks to Jake's infrastructure planning. But the customer support demands were growing beyond what our small team could manage. Madison, we need to talk about scaling our support operations, Jake said during our weekly team meeting. We're getting over 300 customer inquiries per day, and response times are starting to slip. I had hired 2 additional developers and a customer support specialist, but the growth was outpacing our ability to expand the team. More importantly, each new hire required careful vetting to ensure they understood Navigate's mission and could maintain the quality standards that had driven our success. The financial metrics were ordinary. Monthly recurring revenue had grown to $180,000 with profit margins that impressed even Sarah's investment team. Premium subscription conversions remained high, and we were exploring additional revenue streams like partnerships with educational institutions and licensing deals with larger platforms. The most rewarding aspect of the growth was the user feedback. Teenagers were sending detailed stories about how Navigate had transformed their social experiences. Teachers were reporting improved collaboration in group projects. Parents were thanking us for providing tools that actually help their children develop better communication and conflict resolution skills. One message particularly stood out: I've struggled with social anxiety my whole life, but Navigate's conflict resolution features gave me the confidence to address problems with my friends instead of avoiding them. For the first time, I feel like I can handle the social parts of being a teenager. The speaking invitations were exciting but complicated. Conference organizers wanted me to share my entrepreneurship story, but balancing travel with school required careful coordination. My parents had become my unofficial managers, helping me evaluate opportunities and maintain some semblance of normal teenage life. The most prestigious invitation came from the Global Technology Summit in San Francisco, where I would be the youngest keynote speaker in the event's history. The opportunity to address industry leaders about teenage entrepreneurship and the importance of including young voices in technology development was both thrilling and terrifying. Media training became necessary as the interview requests multiplied. Sarah arranged for a communications coach to help me handle difficult questions and stay focused on Navigate's mission rather than just the novelty of my age. I learned to redirect conversations from teenage CEO fascination to substantive discussions about solving real problems for underserved users. The attention brought unexpected challenges. Competitors began emerging, claiming to offer similar features for teenage users. Most were obvious copycats developed by adult teams who missed the nuanced understanding that made Navigate successful, but they still required us to accelerate our product development to maintain our competitive advantage. Privacy concerns became more complex as Navigate's profile increased. User safety had always been our top priority, but the media attention made us a target for scrutiny from both privacy advocates and potential bad actors. We invested heavily in security audits and privacy protections to ensure that our users' data remained safe and secure. The most challenging aspect of sudden fame was maintaining authenticity while managing public expectations. Everyone wanted to know about my secrets to success and advice for young entrepreneurs. But the truth was that I was still figuring things out myself. I was learning leadership, management, and strategic planning in real time while trying to maintain the innovation and user focus that had made Navigate successful. School became increasingly complicated as teachers and administrators struggled to balance my business responsibilities with educational requirements. Some were incredibly supportive, allowing flexibility for important meetings and travel. Others worried that the business success would interfere with my academic development, and social growth thought the investment opportunities multiplied along with the media coverage. Venture capital firms that had previously ignored my pitches were now courting Navigate aggressively. The validation was satisfying, but Sarah and I were selective about additional funding, wanting to maintain control over the company's direction and values. Partnership proposals arrived daily from companies wanting to integrate with Navigate or license our technology. Each opportunity required careful evaluation to ensure alignment with our mission of helping teenagers develop better social and communication skills. The magazine cover that had seemed so surreal was now just one of many media features documenting Navigate's growth and impact. But beyond the headlines and photo shoots, the real measure of success remained unchanged. The thousands of teenagers using our platform to build stronger friendships, resolve conflicts constructively, and navigate the complex social world of adolescence with greater confidence and skill. The handwritten letter arrived on cream-colored stationery, Grandma Rose's elegant cursive flowing across 3 pages of what would become one of the most meaningful documents of my life. My dearest Madison, it began. I have started this letter 17 times, searching for words adequate to express my regret and admiration. Each attempt falls short of what you deserve to hear, but I must try to bridge the chasm my thoughtless words created between us. The letter had taken her 2 weeks to write. She explained when she called to make sure I'd received it. 2 weeks of reflection, research, and reckoning with the magnitude of her misjudgment. She had spent hours reading about Navigate, watching my interviews, and trying to understand how she could have been so wrong about her own granddaughter's potential. Madison, I need you to understand that my failure to see your brilliance wasn't about you. It was about my own limitations, she wrote. I was raised in an era when success had narrow definitions, when children were expected to excel in traditional ways or be considered lacking. I applied those outdated measurements to a young woman whose talents transcended anything I had experience recognizing. The admission was painful to read because it highlighted how deeply ingrained these expectations had become in our family culture. Grandma wasn't just apologizing for her specific words. 3 years earlier, she was acknowledging a pattern of thinking that had shaped how she evaluated all of her grandchildren. When she called to discuss the letter, her voice carried a vulnerability I'd never heard before. Madison, I've been thinking about all the times you tried to share your interests with us, and we dismissed them as unimportant. When you talked about coding or showed us those little programs you'd written, we saw them as hobbies rather than skills. We were looking right at your genius and calling it play. The conversation revealed how much she'd learned since discovering my success. She had taken a basic computer literacy class at the senior center, determined to understand at least the fundamentals of what I did professionally. She had read articles about the technology industry, startup culture, and teenage entrepreneurship. She was educating herself about a world she'd never bothered to explore before. I want you to know that I've told everyone, and I mean everyone, about what you've accomplished, she said. The ladies at Bridge Club, the congregation at church, our neighbors, the grocery store clerk who's gotten tired of hearing about my granddaughter, the CEO. I'm not just proud of you, Madison. I'm in awe of you. The most powerful part of our conversation came when she asked me to help her understand the broader implications of her original statement. When I said you never succeed at anything meaningful, what did that teach you about how adults see young people? What did it tell you about your own worth and potential? Her willingness to examine the damage she'd caused, rather than simply apologizing and moving on, showed genuine remorse and personal growth. She wanted to understand not just what she'd done wrong, but why it was wrong and how to do better going forward. Grandma, it taught me that adults often can't see past their own definitions of success, I replied honestly. It made me feel like I had to prove my worth through achievements rather than just being valued for who I was. But it also taught me to trust my own judgment about what I'm capable of, even when others can't see it. She was quiet for a long moment before responding. That's a terrible burden to place on a child, having to prove their worth to their own family. No wonder you felt like you had to build your success in secret. The healing process wasn't immediate or simple. Grandma's letter and our subsequent conversations were the beginning of rebuilding our relationship, but trust and intimacy couldn't be restored overnight. She had to learn new ways of communicating about achievement and potential, while I had to learn to believe that her support was genuine rather than just a response to my public success. She began asking thoughtful questions about Navigate's development, my business challenges, and my future plans. Her curiosity was authentic rather than performative. She genuinely wanted to understand my world and be part of my journey going forward. Madison, I have a confession, she said during one of our weekly phone calls. I downloaded your app and I've been using it to coordinate activities with the other ladies at the senior center. We used the conflict resolution feature when there was disagreement about the church fundraiser plans, and it actually worked beautifully. The image of my 78-year-old grandmother using Navigate to manage senior center drama was both hilarious and deeply touching. She wasn't just supporting my success, she was engaging with my creation as a genuine user. The broader family dynamics began shifting as Grandma modeled a different way of relating to achievement and potential. She started asking Emma about her interests beyond academic performance, encouraging Daniel to discuss his doubts and uncertainties about medical school, and generally creating space for more authentic conversations about success and fulfillment. I've learned that there are many ways to be extraordinary, she told me. Your way involves seeing problems that adults missed and having the courage and skill to solve them. I should have been nurturing that vision instead of trying to force you into conventional molds. The letter she had written became a catalyst for deeper conversations within our entire family about expectations, support, and the different forms that success and contribution can take. Her willingness to acknowledge her mistake and learn from it created space for all of us to examine our assumptions about achievement and potential by the end of our healing process. Grandma Rose had become one of Navigate's most enthusiastic advocates, sharing the platform with other grandparents and talking proudly about her entrepreneur granddaughter, who had taught her that wisdom and innovation could come from the most unexpected sources. The photograph captured a moment of pure connection. Grandma Rose sitting at my desk, her reading glasses perched on her nose, carefully following my instructions as I guided her through Navigate's conflict resolution interface, her weathered. Hands moved tentatively across the tablet screen while I pointed out features and explained the logic behind each design choice. The image taken by my mother during one of our Sunday afternoon tech sessions would become symbolic of how far our relationship had traveled. Teaching my grandmother to use the platform I created was more meaningful than any business milestone I'd achieved. She approached each lesson with the same careful attention she'd once applied to teaching me to bake cookies, treating every feature explanation as precious knowledge she was determined to master. Now, Madison, when someone in our bridge group has a disagreement about the rules, I can use this conversation starter feature. She asked, her finger hovering over the appropriate button.
Exactly, Grandma.
The app will suggest neutral ways to frame the discussion that focus on finding solutions rather than assigning blame. Her determination to understand my work went beyond surface-level interest. She took notes during our sessions, asked follow-up questions about user research and design principles, and even offered suggestions based on her own social experiences. Her perspectives as someone who had navigated 8 decades of relationships provided insights I hadn't considered. The bridge-building process extended to my entire family as each member found their own way to engage with and support my business
journey.
Daniel, initially uncomfortable with his younger sister's professional success, became fascinated by the intersection of technology and human psychology that Navigate represented. Madison, I've been thinking about the applications of your conflict resolution algorithms in healthcare settings, he said during one family dinner. Medical teams deal with interpersonal conflicts that can affect patient care. Have you considered expanding into professional environments? His suggestion led to productive discussions about Navigate's future development and potential new markets. Instead of competing with my success, he was contributing to it with insights from his own areas of expertise. Emma's engagement was more hands-on. As a naturally gifted student with strong analytical skills, she became my unofficial user experience researcher, conducting surveys among her classmates and providing detailed feedback about feature requests and usability issues. Your notification system is too aggressive for introverted users, she reported after a week of systematic observation. Some of my friends find the automatic check-ins overwhelming rather than helpful. Her feedback led to the development of customizable notification preferences that significantly improved user satisfaction among different personality types. Having a family member who could provide objective, data-driven insights about the platform was invaluable. My parents' adaptation was more gradual but equally meaningful. They had to adjust not only to my professional success, but to the reality that their teenage daughter was now managing adult responsibilities and making decisions that affected other people's livelihoods. Madison, we're proud of what you've accomplished, but we want to make sure you're still getting the support and guidance you need, Mom said during one of our family meetings. You're handling adult challenges, but you're still our daughter, and we want to be here for you. We developed new family routines that acknowledged both my business responsibilities and my need for parental support. Sunday dinners became a time for discussing Navigate's challenges and celebrating successes. My parents became unofficial advisors, offering perspectives on leadership, decision-making, and work-life balance that I couldn't get from my business mentors. Dad's accounting background proved especially valuable as Navigate's financial complexity increased. Madison, you need to start thinking about tax optimization strategies and long-term financial planning, he advised. Success this early gives you opportunities that most people don't have until much later in life. The teaching process went both ways. While I helped my family understand the technology industry and entrepreneurship, they helped me maintain perspective and emotional balance. Their concerns about my social development and academic progress weren't obstacles to my success. They were reminders that sustainable achievement required attention to all aspects of personal growth. Grandma, Rose's enthusiasm for Navigate extended beyond just learning to use it. She became an active advocate within her social circles, introducing other grandparents to the platform, and sharing my story as an example of how adults could better support young people's unconventional talents. I told the ladies at church that if they really want to understand their grandchildren, they should pay attention to what those kids are passionate about. Even if it doesn't make sense to us, she reported after one of her senior center presentations. 3 of them have downloaded your app to stay better connected with their teenage grandchildren. The transformation in our family dynamics was gradual but profound. Instead of predetermined roles and expectations, we developed relationships based on mutual respect and genuine interest in each other's perspectives and achievements. My success had forced all of us to examine our assumptions about potential, achievement, and support. The most powerful moment came during a quiet conversation with Grandma Rose as she practiced using Navigate's planning features to organize a family reunion. "Madison, I want you to know that watching you succeed hasn't just made me proud," she said. "It's made me a better person. You've taught me to look for potential in places I never thought to examine." The bridge building process wasn't complete, family. Relationships are ongoing constructions that require constant maintenance and attention. But we had established a foundation of mutual respect and authentic communication that could support whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The family that had once failed to see my potential was now one of my strongest sources of support and guidance. The first annual company report for Navigate Technologies arrived on my desk in a professional binder. Its clean layout and comprehensive metrics, representing a year of sustained growth that had exceeded every projection we'd made. The document contained 47 pages of financial data, user analytics, and strategic analysis that proved my success wasn't a fluke. It was a sustainable business built on genuine value creation. 12 months after launch, Navigate had 127,000 active users across North America, with expansion into 3 international markets showing promising early results. Monthly recurring revenue had grown to $340,000, and our profit margins remained healthy despite significant investments in team expansion and product development. The numbers told a story of consistent, strategic growth rather than unsustainable hype. The team had evolved from Jake and me working in my bedroom to a proper company with 12 full-time employees, contractors in 4 countries, and office space in a Seattle tech incubator. Managing this growth while maintaining Navigate's original vision and culture required leadership skills I was still developing, but the challenge was invigorating rather than overwhelming. "Madison, I have to admit something," Jake said during our weekly leadership meeting. "When I first started working for you, I thought this might be an interesting experiment for 6 months. I never imagined we'd build something this substantial this quickly." The product had evolved significantly beyond its original scope. User feedback had driven the development of features I'd never anticipated. Academic collaboration tools, family, communication interfaces, and integration with school counseling services. Navigate was becoming a comprehensive platform for improving social interactions across multiple contexts. The most meaningful growth metrics weren't financial. They were the impact measurements that showed how Navigate was actually improving users' lives. Our annual user survey revealed that 89% of active users reported improved conflict resolution skills. 76% felt more confident in social situations, and 84% had successfully maintained friendships that might otherwise have ended due to misunderstandings. One survey response particularly resonated with me. Navigate didn't just help me solve problems with my friends. It taught me how to communicate better with everyone: my parents, teachers, even strangers. I feel like I have superpowers for understanding people now. The media attention had stabilized into a sustainable rhythm of meaningful coverage rather than sensational novelty stories. I was featured in business publications for strategic decisions and product innovations rather than just my age. The shift from teenage CEO curiosity to legitimate business leader recognition felt like a crucial maturation both personally and professionally. Speaking engagements had become a regular part of my schedule, with invitations to address entrepreneurship, conferences, technology summits, and educational institutions. The opportunity to share Navigate's story and advocate for taking young people's ideas seriously had become one of my favorite aspects of the role. The most challenging presentation had been at my own high school, where I addressed a packed auditorium of students, teachers, and parents about entrepreneurship and following unconventional paths. Standing on the stage where I'd attended countless assemblies as an anonymous student was surreal and deeply meaningful. The Most important thing I want you to understand, I told my classmates, is that you don't have to wait for permission to start solving problems you care about. You don't need to finish school, get a degree, or reach a certain age before your ideas become valid. If you see something that needs fixing, start working on it now. The academic balancing act had become more manageable as my school adapted to my unique situation. Several teachers had restructured their classes to accommodate my travel schedule, while others had found creative ways to integrate my business experience into their curriculum. My English teacher asked me to write about entrepreneurship and communication, while my economics teacher invited me to present case studies about startup finance. My relationship with traditional education remained complicated. While I appreciated the intellectual challenges and social experiences that school provided, the gap between classroom learning and real-world application had become stark. I was solving complex business problems that weren't covered in any textbook. While sitting through lectures about theoretical concepts I'd already implemented practically, the college question had become increasingly complex. Elite universities were recruiting me based on my business achievements, offering opportunities to study entrepreneurship, computer science, or business administration. But the traditional four-year timeline felt disconnected from the trajectory Navigate was following. Madison, you have options that most people don't get until much later in life. Sarah counseled during one of our quarterly strategy meetings. You can afford to be selective about education and choose paths that genuinely add value rather than just following conventional expectations. The financial independence was transformative, but also required careful management. I had hired a financial advisor to help structure my personal finances responsibly, ensuring that early success didn't create long-term problems. The goal was to maintain Navigate's growth while building sustainable wealth that could support future ventures and personal goals. The user community had become something extraordinary, a network of teenagers who were genuinely helping each other develop better social and communication skills. Navigate had spawned user-generated content, peer mentorship programs, and even offline meets where users could practice conflict resolution techniques in person. The competitive landscape had evolved significantly, with several major tech companies launching their own teen-focused social tools. Most were poorly designed imitations that missed the psychological sophistication that made Navigate effective, but they represented validation that we had identified a real market need. Looking ahead, the opportunities were both exciting and daunting. Navigate could expand into adjacent markets, develop partnerships with educational institutions, or branch into related products addressing different aspects of social development. The challenge was maintaining focus while exploring growth opportunities that aligned with our core mission. The annual report concluded with a section I'd written myself, reflecting on the lessons learned and principles that would guide Navigate's future development. Success isn't about proving doubters wrong, I wrote. It's about creating value for people who share your vision of what's possible. Navigate exists because teenagers deserve better tools for navigating social complexity. Our continued success will be measured by how well we serve that mission. The new family photo sat prominently on Uncle Mike's mantelpiece, a stark contrast to the image from 4 years earlier. This time, I stood confidently in the center of our gathered family, Grandma Rose's arm wrapped warmly around my shoulders, both of us beaming with genuine affection and mutual respect. The transformation captured in that photograph represented far more than just a change in family dynamics. It documented a complete evolution in how we understood potential, success, and support. The annual Parker family barbecue had returned to Uncle Mike's backyard, but the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of casual dismissal of my interests, family members asked thoughtful questions about Navigate's development and my future plans. Instead of predetermined roles and expectations, our conversations reflected genuine curiosity about each other's perspectives and achievements. Madison, could you explain again how your conflict resolution algorithms work? Asked Aunt Helen, who had become one of Navigate's most enthusiastic adult users. I've been using them with my book club, and they've transformed how we handle disagreements about our selections. The request for explanation wasn't patronizing or performative. It was authentic interest from someone who had experienced firsthand the value of what I created. Seeing my extended family genuinely engage with my work rather than dismissing It as computer stuff was deeply satisfying. Grandma Rose had prepared a special presentation for the gathering, something she called Lessons in Recognizing Extraordinary. She had created a photo album documenting my journey from dismissed middle child to successful CEO, including printed screenshots of Navigate's features, media coverage of my speaking engagements, and letters from users whose lives had been improved by the platform. "I want everyone here to understand something important," she announced as she displayed the album. "4 years ago, I made one of the worst mistakes of my life when I declared that Madison would never succeed at anything meaningful. But my mistake taught all of us something crucial about recognizing and nurturing potential." Her presentation wasn't just about celebrating my achievements. It was about examining how families could better support unconventional talents and avoid the kind of narrow thinking that had nearly cost us our relationship. Madison taught, "That extraordinary potential doesn't always look like what we expect," she continued. "Sometimes it looks like a quiet child who spends hours on a computer building something none of us understand. Sometimes it looks like curiosity about subjects we don't value. Sometimes it looks like questioning assumptions we take for granted." The speech she gave that day was one of the most powerful acknowledgments I'd ever received, not just because it came from someone who had initially doubted me, but because it demonstrated genuine learning and growth. Grandma wasn't just apologizing again. She was using our experience to teach others about recognizing and supporting different forms of intelligence and achievement. Daniel had brought his medical school roommate, who was fascinated by Navigate's applications in healthcare communication. "Madison, we've been discussing how your platform could be adapted for medical team collaboration," Daniel explained. "The conflict resolution features could help address communication breakdowns that affect patient care." The conversation that followed was intellectually stimulating and professionally relevant, a far cry from the awkward family dynamics of previous years. Daniel was contributing to my business thinking while I was offering insights that could benefit his medical training. We were relating as peers with different but complementary expertise. Emma's contribution to the gathering was a detailed presentation about Navigate's impact on our high school's social dynamics. "Madison's app has basically eliminated the drama that used to ruin group projects," she reported. "Teachers are asking if the school can get a license for official use." Her systematic analysis of Navigate's effectiveness in educational settings provided valuable market research while demonstrating how family members could contribute meaningfully to each other's success. When they moved beyond traditional role expectations, the most meaningful moment came when Grandma Rose asked me to address the entire gathering about advice for supporting young people with unconventional talents and interests. "The most important thing adults can do," I said, looking around at faces that now showed genuine respect and attention, "is to take young people seriously when they express passion for something, even if you don't understand it. Ask questions about what they're working on. Offer support even when you can't offer expertise. And never assume that traditional measures of success are the only measures that matter." I continued, drawing from my experience with Navigate's users and my own journey. Young people are capable of extraordinary things when they're given tools, support, and the space to fail and learn. But that potential gets wasted when adults dismiss their interests or try to force them into predetermined paths. The conversation that followed my remarks was rich with examples of family members reconsidering their assumptions about achievement and potential. Uncle Mike talked about his son's interest in video game design, which he previously considered a waste of time. Aunt Sarah discussed her daughter's passion for environmental activism, which she now recognized as genuine leadership potential. The gathering concluded with something unprecedented in our family: history, a group commitment to supporting each other's unconventional interests and achievements. We established regular check-ins where family members could share projects, challenges, and successes without judgment or unsolicited advice. As the day ended, and I helped clean up the same backyard where I'd been publicly dismissed 4 years earlier, I reflected on the complete transformation that had occurred. The family that had once failed to see my potential had become one of my strongest sources of support and encouragement. Grandma Rose approached me as I was packing up my laptop, the same laptop that had once been hidden evidence of secret activities. and was now openly acknowledged as a tool of my professional success. Madison, I want you to know that you didn't just prove me wrong about your potential, she said, her voice filled with pride and affection. You taught all of us to be better at recognizing and nurturing extraordinary qualities in the people we love. The photo on Uncle Mike's mantelpiece would capture this moment of complete reconciliation and transformation. But the real victory wasn't in proving my daughters wrong. It was in building something meaningful that improved people's lives while maintaining the relationships that mattered most to me. As I drove home that evening, navigates user notifications, chiming softly on my phone with messages from teenagers around the world who were using the platform to build stronger friendships and resolve conflicts constructively. I realized that the child who was predicted to never succeed at anything meaningful had created something that was helping thousands of young people navigate the complex social world of adolescence with greater confidence and skill. The journey from dismissed teenager to successful CEO had taught me that potential often exists in forms that others can't recognize, that persistence and vision can overcome systemic obstacles, and that the most meaningful success comes from solving real problems for people who genuinely need solutions. Most importantly, I had learned that family relationships can be rebuilt when people are willing to acknowledge their mistakes, learn from them, and commit to supporting each other's authentic paths to success and fulfillment.